We've seen that there's a correlation of higher ketones progress slowly over time. Now, people say, oh, it's hard to target above the 1.5s and the 2s. There are simple strategies.
Hello everybody, this is Felix Mueller, your favorite friendly neighborhood kidney hacker, coming back again with another episode from the Health Optimization Summit in London in 2024. This time we're talking to Dorian Greenow, the founder of Keto-Mojo, which many of you will be familiar with as you're probably using their devices to measure your blood ketones at home, which is of course one of the key things to do if you're a PKD patient. We're talking about practical aspects of the ketogenic diet and what changes if you're on it long term and how it affects PKD, some of the effects on the mitochondria. So it's a pretty interesting all-around conversation about keto and PKD. Please bear with me because in this case, the camera had a malfunction, so this is audio only. And the audio itself is pretty good, but remember, we are on the exhibition floor there, so there can be some background noises. Enjoy this conversation with Dorian Greenow from Keto-Mojo.
Hello everybody, this is Felix Mueller, your favorite neighborhood kidney hacker, and today I'm joined by Dorian, who is the founder, right?
Yes,
of Keto-Mojo, which all of you guys probably know because they are making it possible for you to test your ketones at home, which we know is a pretty important thing. And for everybody who doesn't know that's pretty important for PKD, maybe you can sort of give us a small introduction on why it's important.
I think when you're looking at testing ketones, I always go back to what is the person's why. And in this particular instance, it's PKD. And so what does the data tell you? If we're looking at, say, type 2 diabetes diagnosis, you just really want to be in ketosis, and that's fine. You don't need to be chasing those ketones. But if we look at the work that Dr. Weems did at the University of Santa Barbara, he recently produced a paper, and he showed a direct correlation of higher ketones in association with the GKI, that is the glucose ketone index, actually led to better outcomes in the shrinking of the kidney in the case of polycystic kidney disease. A really great paper.
Yeah. So, I mean, some listeners will know this already, but some won't. So shrinking PKD, I mean, it's basically unheard of. So, and there's a component that's very involved. It's the mitochondria, right? So
correct.
Maybe you can give us a little overview of that.
Well, I think people think of ketones initially just as an energy source, and they don't really realize that really ketones are a novel hormone. If you take a look, and you have the three ketones: acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone that is within the body. And there's a unique, a very complex interaction within the body. So when somebody goes first on a well-regulated ketogenic diet, it takes about 12 weeks to get fat adapted. This was written up in the paper and the FASTER study that Drs. Volek and Finney did in the Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance, where they showed that the athlete's performance changed over a 12-week period. It got worse before it got better, because what we find on a mitochondrial change is the mitochondria adjust to change to accept medium-chain triglycerides more readily. At the same time as that is going, we're upregulating epigenetics, we're increasing BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and then now the heart is now running almost 25% better because it prefers ketones preferentially to using glucose for engineering. And then on top of all of that, every single biomarker of inflammation goes down.
So when you're saying it's 20% better, that's 20% better compared to glucose?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, because when you're dual fuel, when you both got ketones and glucose, you've got this unique moment where the cell that prefers ketones says, I'll take those. The cell that prefers glucose says, I'll take those. But if you're only in glucosis, you're basically forcing the cell to use something it doesn't really want to preferably use. So there you suddenly give your body the choice, which is what we were evolved to do. Our default status for human beings is nutritional ketosis. We short-circuited ourselves during the agricultural revolution.
So you're saying there's no necessary carbohydrate?
Not at all. There's a great study that's just come out by Dr. Isabella Cooper, and this was focusing on healthy young women, not on birth control, who had had long-term nutritional ketosis. There were a cohort of women who had been models. And in the modeling world, it's well known, just don't eat carbs.
Right.
So for a very young age, they hadn't had any of the hyperinsulinemia or the metabolic damage that we see now in a population scale. So she took them on a 21-day, looking at their diets, registering every single day. Then there was a washout period of 21 days in hyperinsulinemia state, which is the standard NHS guideline diet, where they're having 600 grams of carbs a day, 6 servings, and then did a washout period. And if you take a look and covered 100 different biomarkers, the HOMA-IR went through the roof during the carbohydrate period. The inflammation went through the roof during the carbohydrate period. But it went back to normal very quickly in the washout. But it really showed that healthy long-term keto is actually the preferential way for the human body. But it also said that if you go to Paris and you want to have a croissant, you can have one because you can go back to eating keto normally.
So most people, they would always be in that 600 gram carbohydrate high inflammation state.
Exactly.
Does that ever get better when you stay on the carbohydrates longer?
Well, we can look at that on a population scale. Here, everybody goes, do we need a randomized controlled trial to show the effects of carbohydrates? I don't think we do, because we have it long-term over an entire populations since the 1960s. And what have we seen from the 1960s? The rise of all the NCDs. We've seen the rise of type 2 diabetes, the rise of mental health issues, cardiovascular issues, cancer issues, polycystic kidney disease. All of that is rising up. Have our genetics changed? No, but our food has. And this is where we get to the crux of the matter, that our food has changed. And now 60% of food that is eaten in the United States and about 51% in America, in the UK, really is ultra processed, and it's no longer really food.
Right. So we're talking about the standard American diet and the things that come with it. Can you also talk a little bit to the, and I don't know if this is your area, but to the effects of the seed oils on mitochondrial function?
Well, there are more people who are seed oil experts than me, but if a food has been made in a plant, then we really have a problem. And when we take a look at a plant, we're talking industrial plants.
And not the natural plant.
And not the natural plant. You know what I mean? I do like fermented plants, and that's in the form of a vegetarian, which is a cow.
Sure, yeah.
Added the cow in there a little bit carefully.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I'm a carnivore. I'm a moderate protein sort of person. But I do think it's really important to have good, healthy fats. And in that respect, that would be tallow, that would be coconut oil, that would be olive oil, that could be nut oils. I definitely don't do any seed oils, hydrogenated sunflower oil or canola oils, because if you see the processes they're gone through, I think they're only one molecule away from plastic.
Right.
So do you really want to be putting plastics into your body into that respect?
Used to be engine oil, right?
Correct, yeah. But it was, the name of canola oil was first Canada oil. But Canada oil is not really a good sell, is it? When you want to put something like that, when you're putting a really nice flower on the label and trying to make it look like it's come from a field instead of actually coming from an industrial plant. So it was changed to canola oil. Personally, myself, I don't do any seed oils. I know it's very hard whilst traveling to try and do that. Mm-hmm. But if I look at minimizing it down to the most minuscule possible, if I'm asking for a omelet to be cooked, I can say, can you please cook that in ghee or butter for me? Right. It's a lot easier.
Right. So I think that's a great area to talk about a little bit, like the practical aspects, because you're the keto guy, and people always ask questions like this, like, how can I do this on the road? And you're traveling a lot, so some of your practical tips I think would be well appreciated.
Well, practical tips for traveling on the road, and I'm actually stealing from my wife on this one because she is the one that knows how to do it better than me. So I'm going to take no credit for this one, and she's right next to us off camera right here. She dives on in.
There's Gemma.
There's Gemma. So Gemma's actually a certified sommelier. And first of all, when we're choosing a restaurant, we want to go to a good quality restaurant. And we find that if they have a good wine list, that we generally have good food. So the first thing we're doing is, okay, we're going to choose a restaurant, and remotely we're going to be able to take a look at what the menu is. That's step number one. And then we'll look through that menu and we'll look for the swap outs. okay, maybe there's a cote de boeuf that is on there. Maybe I can actually say, oh, well, I don't want to have the mashed potatoes. I see you've got haricot vert that's down on that pot there. That'll work. If I'm in Europe, it's easy that we could go to a brasserie. We can get a steak tartare really nice, which actually we had a steak tartare last night. We know we could get like a turbo manure, so that's done in a butter sauce and things like that. So by doing a little bit of pre-work when you're choosing making a restaurant reservation, it's good. When it comes to conferences, I generally fast in the morning. It's a lot easier to do that. Airports, you can always get eggs. You can go around and find like those things that's in there.
Yeah.
I bring a lot more fasting in when I'm on the road. I just think it's easier to make life easier. And you learn how to say cream in multiple languages.
Right.
German, I think it's Ram or Ram. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
Oh,
to
yeah.
any Austrians or Germans out there, I apologize.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a very often used word. We say Sahne.
Zana, okay. So that's finding the words in multiple bit. But it's relatively easy because on all menus, you're going to have protein. You're going to find an above ground vegetable. And then you just look for a way to bring in a fat source with you. And, we're in 38 countries and I've got over 3,800 ketone measurements and I'm always in ketosis.
Right. Yeah. And are you particular about anything that you bring, like if you know you're not going to make it to a restaurant?
No, not really. I mean, people like to overthink that a little bit. The key thing for us is maintaining a little bit of salt. So we actually cover some fasting drops with us a little bit that I add into the water, just because I think that it's really hard to get a sufficient magnesium. So that's really the only thing. I think if you have, it's a lot of people think, oh, we see a lot of diets, oh, have this supplement, have that supplement, like that. If your diet requires supplements, is it really a good diet? If you kind of think about it. I personally struggle with getting enough organ meats because I know that's where we're going to get all the vitamins and the minerals that's going to come into play. So at home, I kind of use burgers that have a little bit of organ meats in them.
Oh, that's great.
That's a nice way to do it.
That's great.
I do like a little product called Pluck, which is dried organ meats. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you heard that, add seasoning, so you can add it on the topping of your veggies or something like that.
Stir it in.
To mix those kind of pieces in with it.
Yeah.
But generally, potassium, magnesium, salt.
Right.
And then more for me is just add more salt to everything.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And by the way, our blood work is really, really good. Triglyceride levels are low, trace minerals are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Thyroid is great. Free testosterone is absolutely good. T3 is amazing. I go to visit my doctor once a year, and he says, I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Come back and see me a year unless you don't need me before. I see my dentist more than my doctor now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, same. What do you think about people that are taking statins?
I am not a doctor. That's
on keto.
On keto. I don't think you should be taking statins on keto. If you look at the body of evidence that has come out, and Dr. Seema Hotra is a good one if you follow him on Twitter and others. And even it's the damage that a statin can do outweighs the benefit that it gives. And if we look at the work that's coming out from the lean mass hyperresponder study on cholesterol, this is it's sort of these are not the droids you are looking for. You know what I mean? That's one of those moments where this cholesterol myth needs to be put into the coffin, buried in the ground, and realize that Big Pharma made billions of dollars off bad science.
It's still the most profitable drug in the world, right?
Absolutely. And so with the lean mass hyperresponder study, and I think this is why we actually donated all the meters and strips for their year-long study for 100 people, because we think it's one of the most important studies to actually be done, is they took 100 lean mass hyperresponders, these people that have totally large, high cholesterol, and they put them through a whole series of tests. They also did a calcium score test on every single one.
Yeah.
Then they matched the cohorts and they followed them for a year. But they finished the intake and they haven't done the full publish yet. But on the intake, they matched the age group. I think the age group was mean, sort of had been keto for maybe 4 or 5 years. Average age was in sort of the mid, sort of 50s or something like that. And then they matched them up on the cohort test. and where they say, well, you should have had 8 to 10% of these people should have had a certain amount of calcium on their hearts, so they're ready for cardiovascular disease. They're eating fat, aren't they, all the time? They've got this super high cholesterol. Well, they didn't have any.
So it was less than the average.
Way, 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 way less than the average. And that was even before they started the study, because they needed to make sure it was safe and feasible. Otherwise, they wouldn't come past the ethics board.
Yeah.
So cholesterol, it's vital to our body. It's vital to our brains. The cholesterol that is within our skin is what's turned when we get UVB into vitamin D. We actually make more cholesterol in our bodies. We look at Nick Norwitz when he did his famous Oreo study, that you could take Oreos, which would be better than the statin.
Really?
For lowering your cholesterol. Not that we're advocating for taking Oreos for doing it. One. And by the way, Oreos are vegetarian. So,
Great,
there we go.
Yeah, amazing. Just like potato chips, fries, all the best stuff. Pizza, like there's vegan pizza now. Amazing.
It is a vegetable according to the USDA.
Right, it had some tomato sauce. So for people who are doing keto and they're on PKD, they do keto, they might be wondering what's the best time to measure ketones.
I actually subscribe to the Isabella Cooper school of best time to measurement once a day. If you're going to do a measurement once a day. And that's roughly between 4 and 6 p.m., just before your evening meal, but at least 2 to 3 hours after having any snack or anything like that. And what that one measurement a day will do is it will tell you whether or not you've been eating clean during that day, but it'll also show that when your ketones are at their zenith, because ketones start off lowest in the morning because we have the dawn effect. We have that cortisol spike that pushes up our glucose. So, and that glucose increase is increasing your insulin, which will suppress your ketones. Then we gently rise up during the day. We reach a plateau around about lunch. If we're eating lunch, you might find because of the carbohydrate load that you've had in your lunch, even though it's trace one, it'll drop off a little bit just after lunch. And then it reaches up to its crescendo, its zenith, just before that evening meal. And then it follows your circadian rhythm, and then it drops off at night precipitously. And then overnight, you have just a gentle run rate of ketones whilst you're sleeping, because you don't need so much energy.
Wow. Even though the brain's like cleaning stuff up, we can just do without.
Yeah. Well, remember, your brain is running efficiently on ketones. So if you're in nutritional ketosis, it will pull the number of ketones that it needs, that it preferentially wants to use. There's studies that have been showed that the brain preferentially will choose ketones over glucose.
Yeah.
And glucose actually needs a transporter to get into the brain. It needs a GLUT1, GLUT2, or GLUT3 transporter. And that's where if somebody's missing one of those transporters, or now they're getting hyperinsulinemia within the brain, which is what we're now saying is type 3 diabetes, and that's showing as Alzheimer's.
Is there a connection, or I'm sure there is, between ketosis and getting up to pee at night?
That one I actually don't know on that one.
Because I'm always thinking like, you get the cortisol spike if you're low on energy, and then the glucose might go up, and if you're in ketosis, might be less of an issue.
Look, personally myself, so I can do an N=1, I don't get up at night.
There you go.
So, I mean, that's the only one that I've seen on that, but actually when you get something new and you go like, I wonder if that's actually like an actual thing on where we can see some studies here. But I don't get up at night. So I actually have a great sleep, predominantly, except sometimes when traveling, it's a little bit difficult. But generally I sleep through the night, no issues at that far. And I'm 54 years of age, so you would have thought that some people of my age are getting up several times a night as they've already got development of prostate.
Exactly. I hear that all the time. So I was wondering if you, so you have good experience with that.
Yes.
No issues. So maybe that's a hint right there.
And I think people, when they think of keto being a diuretic, that's only in the first phase.
When you're not adapted.
When you're fasting, getting adapted. Once you've lost your weight and you've got down to your base maintenance rate, your body now is self-regulated. And it's no longer the diuretic, because that diuretic, when it affects nutritional ketosis, is as the fat cells collapsing down to its normal size. That's when you're losing the water weight, and that's where electrolytes need to come on in. So there's this myth of people go like, oh, I'm going to need a pee a lot. Well, that's just for the first phase. I mean, I've been in nutritional ketosis since 2015. And so I have a normal, regular routine.
As have I.
There you go. Love it.
So what I've noticed being in keto that long is, especially in the beginning phase, ketones are very high, like maybe 3 point something. And then over time, seems to be that same diet, same everything, I do tend to get lower readings, like 1.5, 1.0, 0.7 with the same diet. So, and I do have a lot of people on the group that have similar experiences. So what's happening there?
So that's an interesting one, and I still think there's some more work to be done. But I'd like to kind of like come back to a latest study that was done by Dr. Isabella Cooper of the University of Westminster. It's her Keto-Sage study, and it was a study done in 10 young women not taking contraception who had been in long-term nutritional ketosis. And so basically, they took over 100 different biomarkers. They took them through a 21-day period where they were monitoring their ketones, and they were getting about 1.8s, 1.9s, and they had been long-term over 4.5 years in nutritional ketosis. They were non-athletic, which I think is an important thing. They were just, most of them were models. And in the world of modeling, it's just don't eat carbs.
Right.
So then they put them through a washout period where they were put into a normal standard UK diet, and they did that one, and then the washout.
Poor people.
Exactly. And then they saw all the inflammation, all of the HOMA-IR going up and the problems with that, and then brought them back. But they were getting 1.8s and 1.9s.
Yeah.
Now, when we're first starting, I think quite often we're trying to target something because we see in bipolar and within PKD where the higher the ketones and the lower the GKI, you're trying to affect and get an outcome pretty quickly and earlier on that one. I'm normally myself between 1.1 and 1.7. And I stay round about that all the time. So most of the longitudinal studies have been done for like the Virta Health study, where they were only trying to get them into light nutritional ketosis. And so they allowed a little bit of largesse because they just wanted to basically do that remission. And then there was no point in being a little bit more stricter, if you will, on yourself. I personally think that being clean keto is the way to go.
Yeah.
And so I am personally, do I occasionally fall off the wagon? Yes, I do. But that same Keto-Sage study showed how quickly that even when you can come back into nutritional ketosis once you've been fat adapted, because they brought them back for the next 21 days and we're measuring it all. And so I think this is how we were designed ancestrally to be metabolically flexible, that the berries would only come in a short season.
Yeah.
And that we might get them and we might be, and usually they're coming into the fall. So we're trying to pack on a little bit of fat to kind of get ourselves into the fall because we know we're going to come into the leaner season where there are no berries, where there are no nuts.
Yeah.
And then, hey, we've
like
got
the bear going into hibernation.
Bingo. And that's what we were ancestrally designed for. But we never go into hibernation.
Yeah.
Where we're on this global treadmill of hyperinsulinemia because of the global trade.
Yeah. Feel like hibernating all the time.
Yeah, well, that does. You get the sleep after your insulin goes down. But if we look 450 years ago, there was no sugar cane because that was kept in Indonesia.
Right.
There was no sugar beet because we hadn't figured out how to synthesize from the sugar beet. The corn was only in a small Pueblo region in North America and had not come across to Europe.
Yes.
So the tomato had not left Brazil and gone to Italy. So all these great Italian tomato sauces don't exist. Our cuisine was very different. Northern Europeans were only having maybe cabbages and brassicas along with the meat that we had.
Yeah.
And we only got bread from the first ecological disaster of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia used to have lions, tigers, and hippos, and beautiful large forests. And we cut down the forest and we ate all the animals, and all we were left with the desert and seed. And that's how we started having bread, because it was a shelf-stable product that allowed armies to march. It was not the biohacking done effectively, as per your t-shirt.
Yeah.
It wasn't the proper human diet, PhD, if you want to call it that way.
Yeah.
It was just allowing armies to conquer.
Sure. So it's a way to make food last for more people. And like you just get a small sliver of meat that you put on your piece of bread, so it tastes like meat, but it really does not have the same nutrition, right? Yeah. So you're saying, if I understand this correctly, the ketones are coming down over time,
But they stabilize.
because of better uptake by the tissues.
Absolutely. Your mitochondria completely change over that 12-week adaptation, and I think it changes over time.
Yeah.
But Gemma was the opposite. She was really low. She was 0.3s, 0.4s, and 0.5s when she first started. And we were eating the same foods.
Yeah.
It was only as we added more fasting in, especially at conferences, Now, her levels started to rise even better and now have equalized where they're generally above the ones. And so I think it takes a while to reverse the insulin resistancy that you've had within your body. It takes a while to fix all of that damage, to get through that apoptosis and autophagy that is required to bring back that insulin sensitivity.
Yeah. So the one question that arises out of that, if you look at the study that Professor Wimes presented, we see a correlation between improvements in kidney function and absolute ketone level.
Yeah.
So what do you think would change about, or would something change about this if we do the same study with people who are adapted to keto for a couple of years?
If people are adapted for a couple of years to keto, would they actually have PKD?
Well, I mean, we do have some people in the group and they are improving.
Right.
But I mean, PKD is, the cysts are so large,
right,
that I guess at this rate, we would have to do keto for a couple of hundred years to ever get to zero, right?
Okay.
But are we, like, in the beginning phase, it seems that it's pretty simple to get ketones of like 3.5 or something,
yeah,
with pretty normal standard keto diet. And what I'm wondering is it about, and you might not be able to answer this because it's not known, is it about the absolute level of ketones in the blood that sort of make a milieu for the cells so they're sort of forced to uptake some ketones? Or is it just about the presence, as in healthy cells, where it's enough to have maybe like 1.0 because ketones are there if they want it? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. So what we've seen is a correlation, and correlation is not causation, but we've seen that there's a correlation of higher ketones, but actually the GKI was also important, the glucose keto index. So the suppression of the glucose, allowing the ketones to get high, was what has basically shown to have better outcomes.
Yeah.
So that's what we have seen so far within the data. Now, long-term keto, there is the potentiality that you could see that progress maybe slowly over time. Now, people say, oh, it's hard to target above the 1.5s and the 2s. Well, there are simple strategies on that one, which is maybe increasing the amount of MCT oil that you have.
Sure.
Being careful, obviously, because too much MCT oil can add to disaster pants. So don't go rushing out there and adding huge amounts in there.
Spread it over the day.
Yeah, just slowly. I mean, for me, when I'm trying to target a higher level, I like tea and I add heavy cream in my tea. But if I was trying to flip that around, I would say, okay, I'm going to have tea and I'm going to have a little bit of extra MCT. Because 1 ounce of MCT can give you almost a millimolar rise of ketones, and you're doing that endogenously instead of taking it exogenously. We still need more studies to come out on exogenous ketones and ketone esters. I think there's more work to be done on looking at those to target a kind of like in that respect.
Yeah.
So I think it is possible, but again, coming back to the why, my choice of nutritional ketosis is for my mental health. So somebody's going to choose to be a little bit more stricter and a little bit more harder to see if they can get better outcomes.
So maybe one of the final questions, or the final question. Do you think it's feasible, if you know your diet has been consistent over a long time, and in the beginning you've seen maybe ketones of 3, and then you stabilize around 1.5, same diet? Sorry. Would it make sense to sort of start at looking at the glucose at the same time and see, like, if my ketones are at 3 and it dropped down to 1.5, but the glucose stays at the same level?
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm basically at the same state that I was before, but just with improved uptake?
Yeah, I mean, GKI, I think, is the most novel biomarker to be used now in other disease states. It first came from cancer treatments by Professor Seyfried at Boston College. We were the first meter that put GKI on the meter. And because we did that, it started to be used. We're involved in about 88 clinical trials, and I've asked all of them to measure glucose and ketones together to calculate the GKI. Because then we can see its application and use. And in the PKD study with Dr. Weems, he showed that a lower GKI, that means suppressing that glucose, so the lower it was, and having the higher ketones, was actually led to better outcomes.
Yeah.
And so there is the area where lowering that glucose within the body could yield results. And I think that's more important to take a look at. How do you glucose suppress? We see in cancer patients that now they're adding more periodic fasting into it. They're targeting like a pressed pulse where they're going to go, okay, I'm going to do this in association with hyperbaric oxygen. Can learnings come from one side to the other side on that? How will the future of glucose suppression work? What is the uptake in the cyst of glucose and ketones together that could be fueling that growth? All of these things kind of come into play. And the tragedy is, where's the money for this? Because when there's no magic pill and it's just dietary change, finding the funding to do the studies to look at the mechanistic aspect is where I think we really have to look forward and getting those NIH grants and getting those other things.
Yeah, or even crowdfunding. Who knows if that's the future.
But it's really hard to crowdfund the millions of dollars that is really needed to do it. I mean, we've seen the Bazooki Foundation in mental health pumping $45 million, which has changed it. Maybe one day we can find a benefactor who suffered from PKD, who's seen the change and could be like the Bazooki group and say, you know what, I'm going to try and make this happen. And I think that would be fantastic to see it for that particular community.
Okay, Dorian, that was very insightful. And maybe give people a final information on where to get the meter and how to get started.
Yeah, Keto-Mojo, we're available in 38 countries. So that's America. We just opened up Canada 2 months ago. Throughout the European Union. We're in the UK as well. You go to Keto-Mojo.com. We're in Chile too, and South Africa. Go to Keto-Mojo.com, choose your region. You can not only get your meter for your home, but you can connect it to our MyMojo Health Cloud so you can share with your practitioner. We're definitely more than a meter. There's huge amounts of information on our website for free for you to learn and progress on your journey.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, buddy.
Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this conversation, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Comment below for anything that you would like to see me talk about next, and I'll see you on the next episode. Until then, happy healing.